For actually showing out to face you, the voter, who they're asking for your vote, right? Because there's a couple people, right, Ken, that didn't show up to this debate, and we all know what happens when someone stays in their basement, right? Like, we want accountability, so thank the three of you for actually...
Can you hear me? That's a good point, and I should not have failed to mention that. Chuck Norris and Vikram Mashwalani were both invited multiple times over a long distance of time. They had opportunities to come, they chose not to. So yes, again,
yes.
Let's thank these people.
That speaks volumes. So now I'm going to go over the rules of how this debate is going to go. Because we are the party of law and order, I expect all three of you to follow them. So to start, each candidate will have an opportunity to go first. So we're going to rotate after each question. You're going to have 1 minute to give your opening statement. After that, when I ask a question, you'll have 1 minute to give a response. Rebuttals, you'll have 30 seconds. If I ask a follow-up question, you'll also have 30 seconds. If a candidate identifies or calls out another candidate, the candidate called out will have 30 seconds for the rebuttal, so you can call each other out. Let's see. Oh, and then when we get to around 5:05, we're going to have a rapid fire round where it's just going to be short answers, yes or no. You can add a few words, but try not to go over 10 to 15 seconds. Sounds pretty simple. Okay.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, and without further ado, let's kick off the opening statements. Bruce Fenton, you're up first.
Well, thank you very much. My platform is very simple. I'm a Ron Paul Republican, Liberty Republican. I'm for the Constitution and liberty, and I plan on voting no on all of this kind of tyranny and government expansion. But I wanted to take my time to just recognize somebody who couldn't be with us here tonight, who was mentioned earlier, and that's Chuck Norris. There's no shame in dropping out because you're not able to cut it. This is the big leagues. This is the United States Senate. There's absolutely no shame in dropping out. I think Chuck served the establishment for, 55 years or something like that. And so there's no shame, Chuck. I know you're watching. There's no shame. You did the best you could. And I appreciate the three frontrunners being here. For the voters of New Hampshire to decide which of the three of us gets to face Maggie Hassan in November. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Not to mention the timer is over there displayed on that screen, guys, so you'll know, like, when it hits the red mark, it gives you the time you got left. But Kevin, you're up next.
I love how Bruce just picks up right where we left off in the last debate. Nice job, Bruce. I'm Kevin Smith. I come to you from neighboring Londonderry. It's where I grew up, along with my wife of 19 years, Susie, who's here. We're raising our 3 kids who are also here today. And over the last decade, I have the great honor of overseeing the state's 3 largest economic engines, both as a town manager of Londonderry and as chairman of the Pease Development Authority. But over the last 25 years, I believe I have built the strongest conservative record of any of the candidates running. Beginning when I was a state rep at 19, I was named the Pro-Life House Member of the Year in 1997, and I ran the state's premier conservative grassroots organization, Cornerstone. So not only am I a conservative fixer, but I'm a conservative fighter as well. And that's what we need more than ever in Washington, is people to go down there, a new generation of conservative fighters who are going to stop the socialist agenda of Joe Biden and Maggie Hassan and fix the problems we have in Washington. And I look forward to discussing my ideas on those issues today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name's Don Bolduc. I'm running for the United States Senate. I was born and raised in this great state, Laconia, New Hampshire. I was registered Republican at 18 years old, and I served our country for 33 and a half years. When I do something, I do it, and I'm dedicated to it. And right now, God, family, community, country is what we need to rededicate ourselves to. Our God-given rights in the Declaration of Independence have been squandered away by establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats in Washington, D.C. We have to recognize the fault in both if we're going to fix things. And that is the truth. Responsibility, transparency, and truth applies to everybody. We cannot avoid that. We must answer to you. As your United States Senator, I will work for you and nobody else. God bless you, God bless America, and live free or die.
Some of these questions came from people, good friends of mine in different industries. Some came from the audience, and some came from people right here in New Hampshire. These aren't going to be softball questions. They're going to be the real questions that, people like you should be asked these days. So appreciate you guys coming out. First question, what are your preferred pronouns? Just kidding. Question, it's a good one. It's Constitution, right? What is the source of your authority, and what are the limits of the power for the office that you guys seek? So we'll start with you, Kevin, since we started first before.
I think it's very clear. The source of all of our rights comes from God, right? All of our rights come from God, and that's where the government derives its rights, as well as from the people. We are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The government doesn't have any rights unless the people gives the government those rights. And any rights not enumerated in the United States Constitution belong to the states. And we're finally seeing that with a Supreme Court that's finally going back to federalism and putting the rights of certain issues back into the hands of the states. And so I'm a strong believer in states' rights. I'm a strong believer in local rights as well. But what we have today is a federal government that has gone way too over with all of its overreach in so many agencies, and the Congress needs to take back its authority from the executive branch because of all of, the swamp is their bureaucracy, all of the executive orders. Congress needs to take its authority back and push back on all of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody knows that I've been running my campaign based on my belief in God, family, community, and country. But it's really Section 1-8 or 1.8 that gives us all our authorities in the Constitution and the legislative branch. Treasury, Armed Forces, and Commerce. Those are enumerated responsibilities given to us. And we have to get back to those principles in our Declaration of Independence, our purpose document. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the don't tread on me attitude. Our Constitution is where we get our authority. It's where you get your rights. It's what we need to enforce, the constitutional republic. And if we don't do that, then we are going to be a nation that continues to go in the wrong direction. It is imperative for the future of our children and grandchildren. I see them out there, and I'm going to fight for them. God bless America.
Yeah, these rights are natural human rights that if you believe in God, they're given by God, or by nature if you don't believe in God. And what our founding fathers recognized in the Bill of Rights is a limitation on what government can do. The Bill of Rights doesn't give us powers, it doesn't give us rights, it limits what government can do. It says what government cannot do. And that's what they learned, and that's what they did after a lot of thinking and a lot of bloodshed. They have a very, very good system, and it's not being followed right now. Our Constitution is being abused. We have a natural human right to breathe the air, to not wear a political signal, to refuse an injection, or to put an injection in our body if we wanted to. Those are human rights and human choices. And this document was designed to protect those, and it absolutely must be fought with to the death.
Question comes from Jane Cormier. She's former New Hampshire State Rep and former president of New Hampshire Right to Life. She would like to know, do you believe human life begins at conception? If not, when do you believe it begins? And at what stage of development should an unborn child have the right to life? And we'll start with Don.
Well, I believe that human life starts at the very beginning, conception, and I believe that's irrefutable, and it is something that I will always believe in and I will always fight for. I also believe that life goes from the beginning, very beginning, to the very end, and that healthcare is designed to save lives, and that healthcare is designed to improve lives. It's not designed to take lives, and we can't do that anymore in this country. Nobody gave this government, in any document, the right to take somebody's life, unless it's a law for crime and punishment. But other than that, there is no other way. So killing babies is unbelievably irresponsible, and we have to protect them because they cannot protect themselves. Lastly, there's no safer place than the womb of a mother. God bless America.
Bruce Fenton.
You asked the question in a much better way than it's usually asked, and I appreciate that thought. I believe that life begins at conception, and the reason that the way you asked it is correct is because we should be asking exactly when is it okay to use state force to protect an unborn baby. And that is a very, very good question, and I think it should be less than the state of New Hampshire has now, which is 25 weeks. I wouldn't support anything at the federal level, and I think that we should have nuance that's left to the states as far as when exactly that is decided. But I believe that life begins at conception, and I think that it is a legitimate use of the state to protect life, liberty, and property, and that includes the lives of unborn.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, my faith does inform me that life does begin at conception. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm the only one up here that actually has a record of being pro-life. I was again named the Pro-Life House Member of the Year in 1997 for sponsoring the state's first ban on partial birth abortion. And as the head of Cornerstone, I advocated for pro-life policy. But I will tell you what is unconscionable to me, and that is Maggie Hassan's position on this issue. She believes in abortion with no restrictions or limitations through 9 months. She also believes in taxpayer funding of abortions as well. That's unconscionable. I'll tell you something else that's unconscionable, and that is the vote Chuck Norris took a few weeks ago when he voted to authorize $2 million to Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers in the state of New Hampshire. In my opinion, you cannot be both conservative and giving money to Planned Parenthood at the same time.
The next subject is agriculture. This question I consulted a friend of mine. She's a 4th generation dairy farmer, and her family had to move from California to Tennessee because of the regulations. And here's what she had recommended I ask you guys. There is a very real threat to our food supply here in America. We see our food supply in jeopardy with this agenda for the Green New Deal. Big government continues to push regulations on farmers and ranchers that are forcing some to sell off their land. That farmland is subsequently being bought by the likes of Bill Gates, China, and other big corporations backed by big government. How will you ensure family agriculture stays strong in the United States and protect American farmers and ranchers from corporate and foreign takeover? And we're going to start with Bruce.
Yeah, like many things, many problems in the United States you can trace back to government being the problem. If you look at agriculture, it started with President Nixon in the 70s. He decided, and this is a theme that happens again and again in history. You have people in fancy offices that they pay for with the money that they stole from you, who sit down in Washington and think they can run your life or your farm in New Hampshire or a farm in Iowa or a farm in California or Tennessee better than those farmers can. And they're always wrong, and it always creates these kind of effects. President Nixon decided in his wisdom that, and with his advisors, that large farms were better. It was a complete and total disaster. And it's exactly the kind of thing that they're continuing now with ESG, the Green New Deal, other woke agenda. What we need across the board forward, and without exception, is to get government out of our lives, out of our wallets, out of our businesses, out of our farms. We don't need any regulations by government about this whatsoever.
In yesterday's debate, Bruce, would you support a ban from China buying up our farmland?
I'm very against using government as a tool for exactly these kind of things. I don't want to be the person in the fancy office who say, well, I think I can make the world better by banning this person from selling their farm to China or not. That's exactly the kind of authoritarian central control that we need to avoid. We need the Constitution right in here. This is what we need to follow. We don't need to be second guessing things and coming up with our own new regulations, no matter how good the intent is.
Fair enough. How about you, Kevin?
I think Bruce is exactly right. This is another case of government overreach, and government is killing the farms right now. You know, I've lived in 2 towns in New Hampshire. They're both very rural farming communities, one being Litchfield, but the other being Londonderry. We still have 4 working apple orchards in Londonderry. Farmers are hurting. You talk to them, they'll tell you it is more difficult today than it's ever been to farm because it is so expensive, and a lot of it is because of all of the regulations, whether it's the Department of Energy, the EPA, which I like to call the Employment Prevention Agency. All of them put so many regulations on all of us, small business owners and farmers alike, so that's where we really need to attack it. And I think we need to really look at, too, what are the interests of foreign entities like China? What are the interests of folks like Bill Gates, who has the ability to buy up vast swaths of land, and ask, is it really in our national security interest to allow these folks to be able to do that? But certainly I would do anything we can to protect our farmers, and I think it goes back to getting government out, moving it. You know, you've all heard this saying before, if something's successful, what does government do? Tax it. And if it's still successful, then they subsidize it. And we've got to get rid of corporate subsidies once and for all, and we've got to protect our farming community.
Thank you very much. So yes, I would support a ban on the Chinese communists buying anything. They're an existential threat to this great nation. And if we don't get them out of our institutions, we're going to lose this nation. And that's the bottom line. It's not about the Chinese people, it's about the Chinese Communist Party. Yes. I know. I've stared at them across the table in negotiations in Africa and Afghanistan. I know what they're all about. I've seen it. I've breathed it and I lived it. We got to fix our supply chains, which Maggie Hassan has ruined. We got to deregulate the government. I worked on a farm. I lived on a farm. We lost our dairy livelihood because of big dairy, because of government. We lost our maple syrup business because of that. We were negatively affected. We have over 4,000 farms in this great state, and we're underproducing agriculturally. We need big changes. We got to invest. Right now we have taken all of our manufacturing away from America, across America, and we've centralized it around Washington, D.C. Well, where's that going? Right?
Gonna have to pull the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's okay.
I forgot.
It's kind of off in the corner there.
Anyways, get the government out of our damn business. Sorry about that. I apologize.
No, you're good, you're good. And again, there's no right or wrong answers, right? I appreciate all you being honest about where you stand on these issues, because that's what it's all about. It's about being honest and having integrity. So appreciate all of you. Next question on the border. Clearly there's a crisis down there. The immigration issues out of control, human trafficking, drug cartels bringing fentanyl across the border. It's completely out of control. So my question for you guys, one, would you support the completion of the border wall? And why or why not? And what other border or immigration policies would you support that you think would get this crisis under control? And I think we started with Bruce, so we're going to start with you, Kevin.
Thank you. I appreciate this question. So I visited the border. I saw our crisis firsthand back in February. I met with U.S. Border Patrol Council, got a full briefing, and I'm proud to say that I am the only candidate that has a border security plan that has been endorsed by the U.S. Border Patrol Council. I'm happy to have their seal of approval, and you can go on my website and read about that plan. It's very simple. Number one, we need to go back to remain in Mexico policy. Catch and release is not working. It's what's flooding our southern borders right now. Because we used to say, if you're caught and apprehended, you get sent back to Mexico to await your hearing. Now we catch them, and then we release them into the United States. right? We fly them all over the country. They seem to be the only people right now, by the way, that can find a direct flight to anywhere. You all can, but they can, right? They've got baby formula down there. You can't find that on our store shelf, so we need Remain in Mexico. We need to finish the border wall. Absolutely, we need to do that. We need E-Verify, and we need to label the Mexican cartels a foreign terrorist organization so we can go after them. Because they're a big part of this.
John, your take.
All right, well, thank you. So I believe your first question gets a yes. Would I finish the border wall? You're damn right I would. And it would be a border wall system, which is hugely important because an obstacle without observation doesn't work. We need to resource the CBP. They are under-resourced air, land, and sea. I've met with the chief of the border police. I know what he needs. I've worked on the border. I know what the border looks like from a completely different angle than a visit. I worked there. I trained CBP. I have written border policy for our national government. So what do we need to do? We need to reverse everything the Biden administration is doing. And we need to do it now, and we need to do it hard, and it's the only way you're going to do that is by replacing Maggie Hassan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How about you?
Yes, I believe that in finishing the wall. I support completing the wall. Borders are an important part of any country, and I think that we should absolutely crack down on illegal immigration. I'm also in favor of making legal immigration much easier. We now have a situation where people who are trying to follow the rules, like my ancestors did, many of your ancestors did, they're having to wait 7 years to come here legally, while millions and millions of people a year come across illegally. That's wrong. I would like to have a path for the people who are following the rules, who are complying with the law, to be able to come in here just like many of our ancestors did with the Statue of Liberty and other places. You know, give us your poor, your sick, your tired, your hungry. Immigrants serve a great function in America. They are the backbone of America. Many of us are descendants of immigrants, and they could help serving a lot of the job needs and other things. So I think we need to make it easier for them to come in. The only way that's going to happen is if we eliminate entitlements. They have to come here and work for themselves. They can't come here and get handouts. So that's what I'm saying.
All right, so the next question is regarding January 6, 2021. As reported and documented by Just the News, Trump's Pentagon first raised the possibility of sending National Guard troops to the U.S. Capitol 4 days before the January 6 riots, setting in motion a series of rejections by Capitol Police and Democrats that left Congress vulnerable as threats of violence were rising. Would you support an investigation into Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and other Democratic leadership that turned down President Trump's request for National Guard troops days before the breaching of the Capitol, only to turn around and accuse him of inciting the violence he sought to prevent? Starting with you, Don.
Oh, I get that one.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. So, yes to your first question, right?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? That's what we need to do.
Investigate Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
Investigate them all, I say.
Clarify.
Right?
Okay. Yep.
The biggest problem with January 6th is failure of congressional leadership. They failed America. They failed you. They allowed this to happen. And they did it because they're politically motivated. They have absolutely no concern for you. They don't care. The more divisive our communities are, the more problems we have. They can capitalize on it by sneaking through legislation that hurts us economically, spending out of control, and hurting the security of America. That's what it's all about. It's all about how can we distract good Americans so that we can push across bad policy that hurts them. It's time for them to go.
Yes, I absolutely would support an investigation of Schumer and Pelosi and anyone else. And I'd also support an investigation of how they turned this nothing burger into brainwashing our entire society as if this is a thing. There was hundreds and hundreds of people break into the Capitol every year. There was a huge riot during the Kavanaugh hearings who crossed those hallowed halls of Congress to interrupt the democratic process. And there's these words like insurrection and a coup. It is an insult to all of us. It's an insult for us to even be talking about it because we're playing into their ridiculous line of thinking that zip tie man and horned hat man were going to take over the whole government if only they had brought a 38 special. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely crazy to be talking about this at all. We should completely reject this narrative entirely, and we should investigate those who have destroyed our country trying to push it. Absolutely.
Knows that the quote-unquote investigation that's taking place right now is not a fair and honest investigation, and the only way we're going to get one is by securing a majority back in the United States Senate. And yes, I would support having an investigation as to why they didn't do anything about calling out the National Guard if they knew that there might be things that could happen. But you know what else we really need investigations into?
Right.
How about investigating Tony Fauci in the origins of the coronavirus? Something we haven't gotten any answers on right now. We've had more investigations in Congress on UFOs and does alien life exist than we have literally on the coronavirus. How about investigating Hunter Biden and his laptop and what Joe Biden was doing? How about investigating what happened in Afghanistan? How about investigating the FBI and them using themselves as a political weapon? But the only way we're actually going to get to any of these investigations is to get that majority in the Senate.
Thank you so much.
Croc TV.